The night sky over Kyiv trembled with the distant roar of engines, a low hum that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the stars. A single MiG-29 sliced through the darkness, its silhouette a fleeting ghost against the moonlit clouds. Inside the cockpit, the pilot's gloved hands gripped the controls, his breath steady but heavy, fogging the edge of his visor. The city below flickered with the glow of distant fires, a patchwork of light and shadow where life clung to hope amidst chaos. A crackle broke through the radio, a voice, urgent, almost drowned by static. "Spectre, you're alone up there. 2 targets, inbound, 10 kilometers out. Can you engage?" The pilot didn't respond immediately. His eyes, hidden behind the helmet's tinted shield, scanned the horizon. A bead of sweat traced down his temple, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. He was no hero, no myth. Yet to those on the ground, he was becoming something more. A name whispered in the streets, a shadow that carried their defiance into the sky. The Ghost of Kyiv. The jet tilted, banking sharply as the radar pinged a warning. 2 enemy aircraft, their lights blinking like predators in the night, were closing fast. His heart pounded, not with panic, but with a strange clarity. This was his city, his sky. Every maneuver, every choice was for the people below. Mothers huddling in basements, children clutching toys, soldiers peering up through the smoke. He flicked a switch, arming the missiles, and whispered to himself, "For them." The scene felt cinematic, like a frame frozen in time. The jet streaking across the sky, the city's silhouette below, and the pilot's steady gaze locked on the horizon. The air vibrated with tension, the kind that held life and death in balance. What drove a man to face such odds alone? What kept his hands steady when the world below seemed to crumble? Rewind to 12 hours earlier, when the first rays of dawn painted the Kyiv skyline gold. The pilot, Oleksiy, stood on the tarmac of a small airfield, his breath visible in the frigid February air. He wasn't a legend then, just a man with a worn flight jacket, a photo of his daughter tucked in his pocket, and a quiet resolve to protect what mattered most. The war had begun only hours ago, and already the air was thick with uncertainty. Sirens wailed in the distance, a haunting chorus that would become the city's anthem. Oleksiy's squadron had been scrambled at 4 a.m., their briefing rushed but precise. Enemy aircraft were probing the capital's defenses, testing the resolve of a nation caught off guard. The airfield, tucked among snow-dusted pines, buzzed with activity, mechanics shouting, engines roaring to life. Oleksiy's MiG-29, nicknamed Vita, Wind, gleamed under the floodlights, its faded paint a testament to years of service. He ran his hand along its wing, a ritual that grounded him, tethering his heart to the machine that would carry him into the unknown. As he climbed into the cockpit, a young mechanic, Taras, handed him a thermos of tea. "Come back, Captain," Taras said, his voice cracking with youth and worry. Oleksiy nodded, his smile faint but warm. "Keep the lights on for me," he replied, knowing neither of them could promise tomorrow. The jet roared to life, its engines a defiant scream against the morning silence. Oleksiy's mind raced, not with fear, but with memories. His daughter's laughter, his wife's gentle touch, the rolling hills of his village near Lviv. These were the anchors that kept him steady as he taxied toward the runway, the horizon calling him into a sky that held both danger and purpose. Back in the present, high above Kyiv, the radar's warning grew shrill. The enemy aircraft were closer now, their shapes discernible against the clouds. Oleksiy's fingers danced across the controls, his training a reflex honed by years of discipline. But this wasn't a training exercise. This was real. Lives hung in the balance, and the city below looked to him, even if they didn't know his name. The first missile lock sounded, a piercing beep that cut through the cockpit's hum. Oleksiy's voice was calm as he spoke into the radio. "Spectre. Engaging." The jet surged forward, the G-forces pressing him into his seat. The world narrowed to this moment, the sky, the targets, and the weight of a city's hope resting on his shoulders. The skies over Kyiv, the dawn of February 24th, 2022, broke over Kyiv with a fragile stillness, as if the city held its breath. The air was sharp with the bite of late winter, frost clinging to the rooftops of golden-domed churches and Soviet-era apartment blocks. Snow dusted the streets, softening the edges of a capital that had awakened to the distant rumble of conflict. The Dnipro River, winding through the city like a silver thread, reflected the pale light of a sun struggling to pierce the heavy clouds. Kyiv was a city of contrasts, ancient history nestled against modern ambition, now caught in the sudden grip of uncertainty. At the airfield, tucked in a forested pocket 30 kilometers north of the city, the Ukrainian Air Force scrambled to respond. The base was a hive of urgency, its runways lined with aging MiG-29s and Sukhoi jets, relics of a bygone era now pressed into service. Mechanics moved in synchronized chaos, their breath visible as they hauled fuel lines and checked munitions under flickering floodlights. The squadron's pilots, a mix of seasoned veterans and young recruits, gathered in a cramped briefing room. Maps lined the walls, marked with red and blue lines, tracing the movements of aircraft and ground forces. The room smelled of stale coffee and engine oil, a stark contrast to the weight of the moment. The briefing officer, Colonel Marchenko, stood before the pilots, his face etched with lines that seemed deeper than the day before. His voice was steady, but carried an undercurrent of urgency. At 0400 hours, reports confirmed hostile aircraft crossing the border. Their numbers are unclear, but their intent is not. Kyiv is their target. Our job is to hold the line in the air. He pointed to a map, his finger tracing arcs over the city. We have limited radar coverage, outdated systems, and half our jets are grounded for repairs. But we have you. The pilots exchanged glances, their faces a mix of resolve and unease. They knew the odds. Their aircraft, though reliable, were outmatched in technology and numbers. Ground-based air defenses were sparse, stretched thin across a vast front line. The enemy's forces, moving from multiple directions, had already begun probing the capital's airspace. Drones buzzed like hornets in the night, and fighter jets streaked across the border, their intentions obscured by electronic jamming. The Ukrainian pilots were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outwilled. Beyond the airfield, the broader context of the conflict loomed large. In the north, columns of armored vehicles snaked through the countryside, their tracks churning the frozen earth. To the east, artillery echoed like a distant storm. The world watched, breathless, as news channels broadcast grainy footage of explosions and sirens. International leaders convened in emergency sessions, their voices a cacophony of concern. But for the people of Kyiv, the reality was immediate. Families packed bags, subway stations became shelters, and the city's pulse quickened with both fear and defiance. The weather added its own layer of challenge. February's chill hung heavy, with temperatures hovering near freezing. Low clouds blanketed the region, promising snow by evening. For pilots, this meant treacherous flying conditions, limited visibility, icy winds buffeting their jets, and the constant threat of radar blind spots. The MiG-29s, designed for agility rather than stealth, would need to rely on skill and instinct to navigate the cluttered skies. Ground controllers, operating from makeshift stations, struggled to maintain communication amidst electronic interference, leaving pilots like Oleksiy to rely on their own judgment. The airfield itself was a microcosm of the nation's resolve. Its perimeter was guarded by young conscripts, their rifles slung over shoulders as they scanned the tree line. Nearby villages, usually quiet, now hummed with activity as civilians prepared for the unknown. A farmer delivered crates of potatoes to the base, his weathered hands trembling as he wished the soldiers luck. A group of teenagers, barely old enough to drive, painted a faded billboard with the words, "Kyiv stands." These small acts, woven into the fabric of the morning, spoke of a people unwilling to yield. Oleksiy, standing by his jet, absorbed the scene. He was 34, a captain with a decade of flying experience, but today felt different. The weight of the mission pressed against his chest, not as fear, but as responsibility. He thought of his daughter, Sophia, 7 years old, who had drawn a picture of a plane soaring over sunflowers. It was tucked in his flight suit now, a fragile reminder of why he climbed into the cockpit. His wife, Anna, had kissed him goodbye that morning, her eyes bright with unspoken worry. "Come home," she'd whispered, and he'd nodded, unable to promise. The broader military context was grim but unspoken among the pilots. Ukraine's air force was a patchwork of Soviet-era equipment, maintained through ingenuity and grit. Spare parts were scarce, fuel rations tight. Across the country, other airfields reported similar challenges, some already under attack, their runways cratered by missiles. Yet in Kyiv, the pilots carried a quiet pride. They were the first line of defense for a city that symbolized the nation's heart. Their missions were not about grand victories, but about buying time. Time for ground forces to organize, for civilians to find safety, for the world to take notice. As Oleksiy strapped into his MiG-29, the jet's familiar hum vibrated through him, a pulse that synced with his own. The cockpit was a cocoon of dials and switches, its worn leather seat molded to his frame from countless flights. Outside, the sky was a canvas of greys and blues, the clouds heavy with the promise of snow. The radio crackled with updates, hostile aircraft spotted near Zhytomyr, others circling north of Chernihiv. Oleksiy's mission was simple but daunting. Patrol the skies over Kyiv, intercept any threats, and return alive. The airfield fell silent as the first jets taxied to the runway. Mechanics stepped back, their faces upturned, watching the machines they'd painstakingly prepared. Taras, the young mechanic, stood among them, clutching a wrench as if it could anchor him to the moment. Oleksiy caught his eye through the cockpit canopy and raised a gloved hand. A small gesture, but one that carried the weight of trust. The runway stretched ahead, a ribbon of concrete leading to an uncertain sky. As the MiG-29 lifted off, the ground fell away, and Kyiv spread out below, a city of spires and bridges now cloaked in the haze of war. Oleksiy's headset buzzed with the voices of his squadron, their call signs a litany of hope: Falcon, Raven, Spectre. He was Spectre, a name chosen years ago for his knack for slipping through tight spots. Today, that name would take on new meaning, whispered not just among pilots, but in the streets below, where a legend was beginning to form. The sky was both ally and adversary, its vastness offering freedom, but also exposure. Oleksiy climbed to 10,000 feet, the clouds parting briefly to reveal the city's outline. He checked his radar, its green glow a lifeline in the chaos. The mission was clear, but the path was not. Somewhere out there, other jets prowled, their pilots driven by their own reasons, their own stories. In this moment, Oleksiy was not a hero, not a myth, just a man in a machine, carrying the hopes of a city into the sky. The heart behind the helmet. Oleksiy Vovk was not born to be a legend. He was a man of 34, with a lean frame, hardened by years of discipline, and eyes that held both warmth and weariness. Born in a small village near Lviv, where sunflowers bowed to the summer breeze and winters blanketed the fields in snow, he grew up chasing dreams of the sky. As a boy, he'd lie in the grass, watching planes trace lines across the horizon, their contrails like promises of a world beyond the hills. His father, a mechanic, taught him to respect machines, their precision, their power, their fragility. His mother, a school teacher, filled his head with stories of heroes, not the kind who sought glory, but those who carried others' hopes in quiet moments. He joined the Ukrainian Air Force at 20, driven by a love for flight and a sense of duty to a nation he saw as both proud and vulnerable. The MiG-29 became his second home, its cockpit a place where he felt most alive, where the world made sense amidst the hum of engines and the dance of dials. But life wasn't all sky and steel. Oleksiy was a father to Sophia, a 7-year-old with her mother's curls and a laugh that could melt the coldest mornings. His wife, Anna, was his anchor, a nurse with a steady hand and a heart that refused to break, even as the world around them began to crack. On the morning of February 24th, 2022, as Kyiv awoke to sirens, Oleksiy stood by his jet, Vita, at the airfield. In his flight suit pocket, he carried Sophia's drawing, a plane soaring over a field of sunflowers, her childish scrawl reading, "Potato." It was his talisman, a reminder of what waited beyond the war. Anna's last words to him echoed in his mind. Come home. He hadn't promised, not because he doubted his skill, but because he knew the sky held no guarantees. His fear wasn't for himself, but for them. Sophia's future, Anna's strength, the life they'd built in a modest Kyiv apartment, filled with books and laughter. Oleksiy's inner world was a tapestry of resolve and doubt. He wasn't fearless. No pilot was. The cockpit was a place of clarity, but also of isolation, where every decision carried the weight of lives below. He thought of his squadron, his brothers and sisters in arms, each carrying their own burdens. There was Mykola, the jovial lieutenant who hid his nerves with jokes, his wallet stuffed with photos of his newborn son. There was Irina, the youngest pilot, barely 23, whose sharp eyes and sharper instincts made her a natural in the sky, though she confided in Oleksiy her fear of letting the team down. And there was Taras, the mechanic, not a pilot, but the heartbeat of the airfield, whose steady hands kept their jets aloft. Taras was 19, a lanky kid from Odessa with a quick smile and a knack for fixing anything. He'd joined the ground crew a year ago, dreaming of one day flying, but for now, his world was wrenches and fuel lines. He looked up to Oleksiy, not as a hero but as a mentor, someone who saw potential in his clumsy enthusiasm. Taras's parents were still in Odessa, running a small bakery, and he carried their worry in his chest, a quiet ache to make them proud. His hands trembled slightly as he handed Oleksiy the thermos of tea that morning, not from cold, but from the weight of knowing this might be the last time they spoke. Irina, call sign Raven, was a study in contrasts, fierce in the cockpit, gentle on the ground. She'd grown up in Kharkiv, where her older brother had served as a border guard. His stories of duty shaped her, but so did his absence. He'd been injured in a skirmish years earlier, leaving her to carry the family's pride. She joined the Air Force to prove something, not to the world, but to herself. In the briefing room, her eyes met Oleksiy's, a silent pact between them. They'd watch each other's backs, no matter what the sky held. Mykola, call sign Falcon, was the squadron's spirit. At 30, he was a father, his humor a shield against the fear that gnawed at him. He'd taped a photo of his son, Ivan, to his cockpit dashboard, a reminder of why he flew. His jokes, corny, relentless, kept the team grounded. But Oleksiy saw the strain in his friend's eyes. Mykola didn't talk about it, but his wife was pregnant again, and the thought of missing another birth haunted him. These were the people who filled Oleksiy's world, each a thread in the fabric of his resolve. They weren't just pilots or crew, they were family, bound by shared purpose and the unspoken understanding that some might not return. The airfield was their sanctuary, a place where laughter and silence coexisted, where a shared glance could say more than words. Oleksiy's role as captain wasn't just about leading missions. It was about carrying their trust, their fears, their hopes. As he prepared for the mission, Oleksiy's thoughts drifted to his village, to the sunflower fields where he'd once dreamed of flying. He wondered if they'd still bloom this summer, or if the war would leave them scorched. He thought of Sophia's drawing, the plane's wings cutting through a bright sky, and felt a pang of longing, not for glory, but for the chance to see her grow. His fear wasn't death. It was the thought of leaving her without a story to tell, without knowing why her father flew. In the briefing room, as Colonel Marchenko outlined the mission, Oleksiy studied his team. Irina's hands were steady, but her lips moved silently, rehearsing maneuvers. Mykola cracked a joke about the cold coffee, earning a ripple of laughter that eased the tension. Taras lingered at the door, his wrench tapping nervously against his thigh. They were ordinary people, pulled into an extraordinary moment, each carrying a piece of home into the sky. Oleksiy's own heart was a storm of emotions, duty clashing with longing, courage wrestling with doubt. He didn't see himself as the ghost others would later whisper about. He was just Oleksiy, a man who loved his family, his country, his sky. Yet, as he climbed into Viter's cockpit, he felt the weight of their eyes on him, his team, his city, his nation, not as a hero, but as a man who refused to look away from the storm. The jet's canopy closed with a soft thud, sealing him in a world of dials and hums. He adjusted Sophia's drawing, tucking it where he could see it, a splash of color against the cockpit's gray. The radio crackled, Colonel Marchenko's voice cutting through. "Spectre, your lead. Keep them safe." Oleksiy nodded, though no one could see, and whispered to himself, "For them." The runway beckoned, and beyond it, the sky, a vast, uncertain canvas where their story would be written. Movement, the flight to the unknown. The runway stretched before Oleksiy like a ribbon of resolve, its edges blurred by the pre-dawn frost. The MiG-29, Vita, roared beneath him, its engines a primal force that vibrated through his bones. As he pushed the throttle forward, the jet surged, lifting off with a grace that belied its age. The airfield fell away, a cluster of lights swallowed by the vastness of the morning. Kyiv's skyline emerged in glimpses through the low clouds, golden domes catching the first rays of sunlight, apartment blocks standing resolute against the grey. Oleksiy's heart steadied with the rhythm of the climb, but his mind churned with the weight of the mission ahead. The squadron's orders were clear: patrol the airspace over Kyiv, intercept any hostile aircraft, and protect the city's skies. The briefing had been stark: limited radar, sporadic communications, and an enemy whose numbers and tactics were uncertain. Oleksiy, call sign Spectre, led a flight of 4 jets: his own, Irina's Raven, Mykola's Falcon, and a veteran pilot, Dmitro, call sign Hawk. Their MiG-29s, though agile, were relics compared to the advanced systems they might face. Yet, as Oleksiy leveled off at 12,000 feet, the sky felt like home, a place where skill and instinct could tip the scales. The air was thick with the scent of jet fuel and the bite of winter, even at altitude. Clouds hung low, their edges tinged with the gold of dawn, but they promised snow by nightfall. The weather was both ally and adversary, cloaking the jets from ground-based threats, but obscuring their view of the horizon. Oleksiy's headset crackled with static, the ground controller's voice faint but steady. "Spectre. Vector 090. Maintain altitude. Reports of activity near Bucha." Oleksiy acknowledged with a curt "Copy," his eyes scanning the radar's green glow. The screen flickered, a reminder of the aging systems they relied on. Below, Kyiv was a mosaic of resilience. The Dnipro River glinted like a silver vein, its bridges bustling with early evacuations, cars crawling, headlights piercing the haze. Subways rumbled beneath the city, now shelters for families clutching blankets and hope. Oleksiy imagined Sofia and Anna among them, safe in a basement, Anna's steady voice calming their daughter. The thought anchored him, sharpening his focus as the squadron spread into a loose formation, wings glinting in the half-light. The flight to the patrol zone was a study in contrasts, moments of serene beauty punctuated by tension. The clouds parted briefly, revealing the rolling hills north of Kyiv, their snow-dusted slopes a reminder of quieter days. Oleksiy's mind flickered to his village near Lviv, where he'd once flown kites with Sofia, her laughter echoing across the fields. The memory was a fleeting warmth, quickly overshadowed by the hum of the cockpit and the weight of the mission. He glanced at Sofia's drawing, taped to the dashboard, a plane over sunflowers, a child's vision of freedom. Irina's voice broke through the radio, sharp but calm. "Raven, checking in. Visual on your 6, Spectre." Her jet trailed slightly to his right, a shadow against the clouds. Mykola followed, his voice lighter despite the stakes. "Falcon here. Anyone else freezing up there? Or is it just me?" A chuckle crackled through the headsets, a small rebellion against the tension. Dmytro, ever stoic, simply reported, "Hawk, systems green." The camaraderie was a lifeline, binding them through the uncertainty of the sky. The patrol zone, a swath of airspace northwest of Kyiv, was deceptively quiet. The clouds thickened, swallowing the horizon, and the radar pinged intermittently, its signals distorted by electronic interference. Oleksiy adjusted his course, guiding the squadron through a gentle arc. The city below was a distant hum. Its pulse felt more than seen. He thought of Taras, the young mechanic, back at the airfield, likely watching the skies with his wrench in hand. Taras had stayed behind, his role to keep the jets ready for their return. If they returned. The thought tightened Oleksiy's grip on the controls. The landscape below shifted as they flew. Rural villages dotted the terrain, their chimneys trailing smoke into the cold air. A lone tractor sat abandoned in a field, its driver likely fled or hiding. The war had come swiftly, reshaping the ordinary into the surreal. Oleksiy's eyes flicked to the radar, then to the sky, searching for movement, a glint of metal, a trail of exhaust. The silence was unnerving, a calm that felt like the breath before a storm. Halfway through the patrol, the radio crackled with urgency. "Spectre, ground control. 2 unidentified contacts, bearing 310, range 15 kilometers. Low altitude, fast movers." Oleksiy's pulse quickened, but his voice remained steady. "Copy ground. Squadron, Titan formation. Prepare to engage." The jets converged, their wings slicing through the clouds like blades. Irina's voice was taut. "Raven, visual negative. Clouds are thick," Mykola added. "Falcon, same. Radar's spotty." Dmitro's calm cut through. "Hawk, stay sharp. They're out there." The squadron descended to 8,000 feet, the clouds parting to reveal flashes of the ground. Fields, roads, the distant sprawl of Kyiv. The city's lights flickered like stars fallen to earth, a reminder of what they protected. Oleksiy's mind raced, calculating angles, speeds, risks. The MiG-29 was built for dogfights, its agility a match for newer jets if flown with precision. But precision required clarity, and the weather was a shroud, hiding both friend and foe. A moment of stillness settled over the cockpit. Oleksiy's breath fogged the edge of his visor, his fingers resting lightly on the controls. He thought of Anna, her quiet strength, and Sophia, her small hand clutching his before he left. The drawing on the dashboard seemed to glow, its colors vivid against the cockpit's gray. "For them," he whispered, a mantra that steadied his heart. The radio buzzed again, the controller's voice strained. "Spectre, contacts closing. 10 kilometers. Confirm engagement." Oleksiy's response was immediate. "Spectre, engaging." He banked the jet, the G-forces pressing him into the seat. The squadron followed, their formation a silent promise of unity. The clouds swallowed them, the world narrowing to the radar's pulse and the hum of engines. Somewhere ahead, two shapes moved through the sky, their intent unknown, but their presence a threat. Oleksiy's training took over, but his thoughts lingered on the people below, strangers in shelters, soldiers on the ground, his family waiting in the dark. The air grew heavier, the clouds denser, as the squadron approached the intercept point. A faint glow broke through the haze, a jet's exhaust, fleeting but unmistakable. Oleksiy's radar locked, the beep sharp in his ears. "Spectre, target acquired," he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through him. Irina confirmed. "Raven, locked." Mikola's tone was grim. "Falcon, ready." Dimitro's voice was a low growl. "Hawk, on your wing." The moment hung like a held breath. Oleksiy's eyes flicked to Sophia's drawing, its sunflowers a beacon in the chaos. The sky was no longer just a battlefield. It was a canvas where courage would be tested, where ordinary men and women became something more. The jets closed the distance, the clouds parting to reveal the faint outlines of their targets. Oleksiy's heart pounded, not with fear, but with purpose. The city below, its people, its dreams, they were why he flew. As the squadron prepared to engage, a sudden burst of static filled the radio, the controller's voice cutting in. "Spectre, additional contacts detected. You're outnumbered." The words landed like a stone, but Oleksiy's resolve didn't waver. He glanced at the drawing, then at the sky ahead. "Copy," he said, his voice steady. "We hold the line." The jets surged forward, the clouds swirling around them like a storm about to break. The mission was no longer just a patrol. It was a stand, a moment where the sky would decide who they were. Oleksiy led his team into the unknown, their wings cutting through the dawn, carrying the hopes of a city into the heart of the storm. The battle begins, a dance in the clouds. The sky over Kyiv was a churning sea of clouds, their edges lit by the faint glow of dawn breaking through the horizon. Oleksiy's MiG-29, Viter, sliced through the haze, its engines a steady roar that drowned out the pounding of his heart. The radar's shrill beep cut through the cockpit, a warning that the two unidentified aircraft were now 7 kilometers away, closing fast. A third contact had appeared moments ago, its signal faint but unmistakable. A new threat in an already uneven fight. Oleksiy's voice, calm despite the tightening in his chest, crackled through the squadron's headsets. "Spectre to all. Targets at 310, 6 kilometers. Stay tight. Eyes sharp." The clouds parted briefly, revealing flashes of the city below. Kyiv's spires and bridges cloaked in a smoky dawn, their outlines soft but resolute. The Dnipro River caught the light, a silver thread winding through the chaos. Oleksiy's thoughts flickered to Sophia and Anna, somewhere below, their faces a quiet anchor in his mind. The drawing taped to his dashboard, a child's plane soaring over sunflowers, seemed to pulse with life, a reminder of why he flew. He adjusted his grip on the controls, the jet responding like an extension of his will. Irina's voice broke the silence, steady but taut. "Raven, visual on lead target. Low, moving fast." Her MiG-29 trailed to Oleksiy's right, its silhouette a fleeting shadow in the clouds. "Mykola, callsign Falcon," chimed in, his tone masking nerves with humor. "Falcon here. 3 against 4? I've had worse odds at cards." Dmytro, Hawk, was all business. Hawk, locked on second contact, ready to engage. The squadron's formation tightened, their jets weaving through the clouds like dancers in a deadly ballet. The first target materialized, a sleek jet cutting through the haze, its exhaust a faint glow against the grey. Oleksiy's radar confirmed the lock, the beep steady now. He banked Vita sharply, the G-forces pressing him into the seat, his breath shallow but controlled. The clouds swirled around them, a disorienting shroud that hid both predator and prey. "Spectre, engaging lid," he said, his finger hovering over the missile release. The moment felt suspended, the sky holding its breath as the distance closed. 5 kilometers, then 4. A sudden burst of static flooded the radio, the ground controller's voice frantic. "Spectre, radar jamming detected. You're on your own." The words landed like a stone, but Oleksiy's focus didn't waver. The radar flickered, its screen a mess of distorted signals. He relied on instinct now, his eyes scanning the clouds for movement. The enemy jet broke into view again, climbing sharply, its pilot aware of the pursuit. Oleksiy followed, Vita's engine screaming as he pushed the jet to its limits. The first maneuver was a test, a quick jink to the left, then a climb, testing the enemy's reaction. The opposing jet mirrored him, its pilot skilled, anticipating the move. Oleksiy's mind raced, calculating angles and speeds. The MiG-29 was built for agility, its frame lighter than its modern counterparts, but it demanded precision. He rolled right, diving through a gap in the clouds, the city's lights flashing below like a distant dream. The enemy jet followed, its silhouette growing larger in his rear view. Irina's voice cut through. "Raven, second target breaking left. I'm on it." Her jet peeled away, a streak of silver against the clouds. Mykola and Dmytro stayed on Oleksiy's wing, their presence a silent promise. The third contact remained elusive, its signal fading in and out, a ghost in the system. Oleksiy's stomach tightened, not fear, but the weight of leading his team into the unknown. He thought of Taras, the young mechanic, waiting back at the airfield, his wrench a talisman against the chaos. The battle unfolded in bursts of motion and stillness. Oleksiy locked onto the lid jet again, the missile tone steady in his ears. He fired, a flash of light as the missile streaked away, its trail swallowed by the clouds. The enemy jet banked hard, deploying flares that bloomed like fireflies in the dawn. The missile veered, chasing the decoys, and Oleksiy cursed under his breath. "Spectre, missed, re-engaging." His voice was calm, but his mind was a storm of calculations. Fuel levels, distance, the dwindling window to protect the city below. Irina's jet danced with the second target, her voice sharp over the radio. "Raven, target's climbing, he's fast!" Her MiG-29 twisted through the clouds, a shadow weaving through light. A burst of tracer fire lit the sky, not aimed at her, but a warning, a reminder of the stakes. She held her course, her training overriding the instinct to flinch. Oleksiy caught a glimpse of her jet, its wings glinting as it rolled, and felt a surge of pride. She was young, but her heart was steel. Mykola's voice broke through, strained. "Falcon, third contact on my tail, can't shake him." Oleksiy's head snapped to the radar, but the screen was useless, a blur of static. He scanned the sky, spotting Mykola's jet diving through the clouds, a darker shape in pursuit. "Falcon, break right now!" Oleksiy barked, banking Vita to intercept. Dmytro followed, his jet a steady presence. The third enemy jet was closer now, its outline sharp against the clouds, its intent clear. The sky became a canvas of chaos, jets weaving, clouds swirling, the distant hum of Kyiv a heartbeat beneath it all. Oleksiy's world narrowed to the cockpit, the hum of Vita's engines, the flicker of Sofia's drawing, the rhythm of his own breath. He pulled a high G turn, the jet groaning under the strain, to cut off the third target. Mykola's jet rolled hard, breaking free, but the enemy stayed close, its pilot relentless. Oleksiy's missile lock sounded again, the tone a lifeline in the chaos. "Spectre, engaging," he said, firing a second missile. The missile streaked through the clouds, its path true this time. A distant flash lit the sky, followed by a plume of smoke. The third jet spiraled, its pilot ejecting into the dawn, a parachute blooming like a white flower against the grey. Oleksiy exhaled, his hand steady, but his chest tight. "Spectre, one down," he reported, his voice flat to mask the surge of relief. Mykola's voice came through, breathless but alive. "Falcon thanks, Spectre. Owe you one." Irina's fight continued, her jet locked in a deadly dance with the second target. She climbed, then dove, using the clouds to her advantage. Her voice was steady. Raven, still engaged. He's slippery. Oleksiy glanced at his fuel gauge, running low, too low for a prolonged fight. The lead jet, his original target, had vanished into the clouds, likely regrouping. The squadron was stretched thin, their formation fraying under the pressure. Oleksiy made a split-second decision. "Raven, break off. Regroup on me. We can't stay here." Irina hesitated, her instinct to pursue warring with discipline. "Copy, Spectre," she said finally, her jet banking to rejoin the formation. Dmytro's voice was calm but urgent. "Hawk, fuel critical. We need to head back." Oleksiy nodded to himself, the weight of leadership pressing harder. The city below depended on them, but so did their families, their futures. He scanned the sky one last time, the lead jet still out there, a shadow in the storm. The squadron reformed, their jets battered but intact, the clouds closing around them like a curtain. The fight wasn't over, but this round was done. Oleksiy's mind raced with what-ifs. Had they done enough? Had they bought the city the time it needed? The radio crackled faintly, the ground controller's voice breaking through. "Spectre, good work. Return to base." The words were a lifeline, but Oleksiy knew the sky would call them back soon. As they turned toward the airfield, the clouds parted, revealing Kyiv's skyline once more. The city stood, wounded but unbroken, its lights a testament to resilience. Oleksiy's eyes lingered on Sofia's drawing, its sunflowers a promise of brighter days. The squadron flew in silence, their jets cutting through the dawn, carrying the weight of a city's hope and the burden of a battle unfinished. The sacrifice, a choice in the storm, its engines a steady pulse against the growing storm. The squadron had regrouped, their jets battered but holding formation, the faint lights of the city below flickering through gaps in the haze. The battle had left them shaken, one enemy jet down, but the lead target had vanished into the clouds, and fuel gauges glowed amber in every cockpit. Oleksiy's radio crackled, the ground controller's voice faint but urgent. "Spectre, new contact, bearing 045, 8 kilometers. Fast mover, heading for the city center." Oleksiy's heart sank, not from fear, but from the weight of what lay ahead. The city center, Kyiv's heart, where hospitals, schools and shelters held thousands, including Anna and Sofia. His fingers tightened on the controls, Sofia's drawing of a plane over sunflowers catching his eye, its colors vivid against the cockpit's gray. Copy, ground, he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. Squadron, on me. We intercept. Irina, call sign Raven, responded first, her voice sharp with resolve. Raven, ready. Mykola, Falcon, followed, his usual humor replaced by grit. Falcon, low on fuel, but in. Dmytro, Hawk, was blunt. Hawk, critical. I've got one pass left. The squadron's jets tilted in unison, their wings slicing through the clouds like blades. The air was heavy with the promise of snow. The horizon, a blur of grey and gold as dawn fought to break through. The radar pinged, erratic but insistent, pinpointing the new contact, a single jet, moving fast and low, its path aimed at Kyiv's core. Oleksiy's mind raced, calculating the odds. Their fuel was nearly spent, their missiles limited, and the enemy's jamming made radar unreliable. The city's air defenses were sparse, stretched thin by the chaos of the first day. This jet, if it reached its target, could tip the scales. Oleksiy's eyes flicked to Sophia's drawing, her childish scrawl a silent plea. For Tato. He whispered, for them, and pushed Vita into a dive. The clouds parted, revealing the enemy jet, a sleek shadow skimming the treetops, its exhaust a faint glow. It was faster, newer, its pilot likely confident in the chaos of the morning. Oleksiy's radar flickered, struggling to maintain a lock. He relied on instinct, guiding Vita through the haze, the city's skyline looming closer below. The Dnipro River glinted, its bridges crowded with fleeing cars, their headlights a constellation of hope and fear. Irina's voice cut through. Raven, I've got him! Locking! Her jet trailed Oleksiy's, her focus razor-sharp despite the fatigue in her tone. Mykola, struggling to keep pace, reported, Falcon, engines sluggish. I'm losing thrust. Dmytro's voice was grim. Hawk, fuel's gone. I'm dead weight. Oleksiy's chest tightened. His squadron was fraying, their jets pushed beyond their limits. The choice loomed, press the attack and risk losing his team, or break off and leave the city vulnerable. The enemy jet climbed suddenly, breaking through the clouds, its pilot aware of the pursuit. Oleksiy followed, Vita groaning under the strain of the ascent. The G-forces pressed him into the seat, his vision narrowing. But he held the course. The missile lock tone sounded, faint and unsteady. He fired, the missile streaking away, but flares bloomed in the sky, a cascade of light that drew it off course. Spectre, missed, he said, his voice tight. The enemy jet banked, circling back toward the city. Irina dove after it, her jet a silver streak. Raven, re-engaging, she called, her voice steady but strained. Oleksiy saw her jet twist through the clouds, closing the gap. The enemy pilot was skilled, weaving through the haze, using the weather to his advantage. Irina's missile lock sounded, but before she could fire, a burst of static flooded the radio. The enemy jet had deployed countermeasures, jamming her systems. Her voice cracked. Raven, blind. I've lost the lock. Oleksiy's mind raced. The enemy jet was now 5 kilometers from the city center, its path clear. Ground defenses might stop it, but the risk was too great. He glanced at his fuel gauge. Critical, barely enough for one more maneuver. Mykola's jet was faltering. Dmytro's nearly out of the fight. Irina was closest, but her systems were compromised. The choice was his, and it was no choice at all. Squadron, break off, Oleksiy said, his voice calm but heavy. Return to base, that's an order. Mykola protested. Falcon, I can still... But Oleksiy cut him off. Falcon, you're done. Get back. All of you. Irina's voice was quiet, almost pleading. Raven, Spectre, don't do this alone. Dmytro, ever stoic, said simply. Hawk, understood. Good luck. The squadron's jets peeled away, their silhouettes fading into the clouds, leaving Oleksiy alone in the sky. He pushed Vita forward, the jet shaking as it neared its limits. The enemy jet was ahead, a dark shape against the city's glow. Oleksiy's radar flickered, useless now, but his eyes locked onto the target. The cockpit was a cocoon of sound, the whine of engines, the beep of warnings, the thud of his own pulse. Sophia's drawing seemed to glow, its sunflowers a beacon in the chaos. He thought of Anna's voice, her whispered, "Come home," and knew this moment might break that promise. The enemy jet descended, aiming for a bridge packed with evacuees. Oleksiy's breath caught, not from fear, but from clarity. He couldn't let it reach the city. He armed his last missile, the lock tone weak but holding. The distance closed, 3 kilometers, then 2. The enemy pilot jinked, deploying more flares, but Oleksiy anticipated the move, adjusting Vita's path. He fired, the missile streaking through the clouds, a comet in the dawn. The explosion was a distant flash, the enemy jet spiraling downward, its wreckage swallowed by the horizon. No parachute bloomed this time, but Oleksiy didn't dwell on it. His fuel warning blared, the cockpit lights flashing red. Vita shuddered, its engines coughing as the last of the fuel burned away. The airfield was too far, the city below his only option. He scanned for a clear landing zone, a field, a road, anything to avoid the crowded streets. The radio crackled, Irina's voice breaking through. "Spectre, status!" He didn't answer, his focus on guiding Vita down. The clouds parted, revealing a stretch of open ground near the river, its snow-dusted surface a faint hope. He angled the jet, the controls sluggish, the world slowing to a heartbeat. "For them," he whispered. Sophia's drawing the last thing he saw as he braced for impact. The jet hit the ground, skidding across the snow, its wings tearing through the earth. The cockpit rattled, but Oleksiy held steady, his training a reflex against the chaos. The jet came to rest, smoke curling from its frame, but intact. He unstrapped, his hands shaking now, and climbed out, collapsing into the snow. The city's lights glowed in the distance. Unbroken, alive, Irina's jet circled overhead, her voice trembling with relief. "Raven to ground, Spectres down, alive." Mikola's laugh broke through. "Falcon, you bastard, you did it!" Dimitro's voice was quiet. "Hawk, good work." Oleksiy lay in the snow, staring at the sky, the clouds parting to reveal the first stars of evening. He pulled Sophia's drawing from his pocket, its edges crumpled but whole, and held it to his chest. The city stood, its pulse steady, its people unaware of the shadow that had guarded them. Oleksiy wasn't a hero, not yet a legend, just a man who made a choice. But in the streets below, whispers were beginning, a name taking shape. The Ghost of Kyiv. Aftermath. The silence after the storm. The snow crunched beneath Oleksiy's boots as he staggered away from the wreckage of Viter, his MiG-29, now a broken silhouette against the twilight. Smoke curled from its crumpled frame, blending with the mist that hung over the open field near the Dnipro River. The jet had skidded to a stop just short of a frozen ditch, its wings scarred but intact, a testament to Oleksiy's skill in guiding it down. His breath came in sharp gasps, visible in the frigid air, each exhale a reminder that he was alive. The city of Kyiv loomed in the distance, its lights flickering like candles refusing to gutter out, a skyline that stood unbroken despite the chaos of the day. Oleksiy sank to his knees, the cold seeping through his flight suit, his hands clutching Sophia's drawing. Its edges crumpled, but the sunflowers still bright. The silence was profound, a stark contrast to the roar of engines and the chaos of the sky moments ago. The clouds above parted, revealing a scattering of stars, their light faint but steady. He tilted his head back, letting the quiet wash over him, a moment of stillness that felt both fragile and eternal. The battle was over, at least for now, but its weight lingered in the ache of his muscles and the tightness in his chest. The radio in his helmet crackled faintly, Irina's voice cutting through. "Spectre, ground teams en route. Hold position." Her tone was steady, but Oleksiy heard the relief beneath it. Mykola's voice followed, softer than usual. "Falcon, you're one lucky bastard." Dmytro, ever reserved, added, "Hawk, we're clear. Base reports no further contacts." The squadron had made it back to the airfield, their jets low on fuel but whole. Oleksiy didn't respond. Not yet. He needed this moment, this silence, to anchor himself to the ground. The field around him was a canvas of aftermath. Snow churned into mud, tire tracks from the jet's skid, a faint smell of scorched metal. In the distance, the wreckage of the enemy jet burned, a smudge of black against the horizon, its glow fading into the dusk. Oleksiy didn't linger on it. His mind was on the city, on the people who would never know how close the danger had come. He thought of Anna and Sophia, safe in a shelter somewhere, and felt a pang of longing, not just to see them, but to be the man they believed he was. A low rumble broke the silence, the sound of an approaching vehicle. Headlights pierced the twilight, bouncing across the uneven ground. A military truck, its frame battered but sturdy, rolled to a stop. Taras, the young mechanic, leapt out before the engine died, his face pale but lit with a mix of worry and relief. "Captain," he called, sprinting through the snow. "You're alive!" He dropped to his knees beside Oleksiy, his hands hovering as if unsure whether to help or simply marvel. "Vita's a mess, but you're here." Oleksiy managed a faint smile, his voice hoarse. "Told you to keep the lights on, didn't I?" Taras laughed, a shaky sound that broke the tension. The ground crew followed, their boots crunching as they assessed the jet, their voices a low hum of technical jargon. Oleksiy stood, leaning on Taras for support, his legs unsteady, but his resolve firm. The truck's driver, a grizzled sergeant named Petro, clapped him on the shoulder. "Good work, Spectre. The city's still standing." The ride back to the airfield was quiet, the truck rattling over frozen roads. Oleksiy sat in the back, Sophia's drawing still in his hand, his eyes tracing the skyline. Kyiv was wounded. Smoke rose from distant districts, sirens wailed faintly. But it endured. The bridges over the Dnipro stood, their arches unbroken, carrying families to safety. The golden domes of churches gleamed under the fading light, symbols of a spirit that refused to yield. Oleksiy's chest tightened, not with pride, but with gratitude, for the chance to see another dusk, to know the city still breathed. At the airfield, the squadron was waiting. Irina was the first to reach him, her flight suit streaked with sweat, her eyes bright with unspoken relief. She didn't speak, just gripped his arm, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden. Mykola followed, his usual grin tempered by exhaustion. "Falcon's never flying with you again," he joked, but his voice cracked, betraying the weight of the day. Dmytro nodded from a distance, his stoic face softening for a moment, a rare gesture of respect. Colonel Marchenko met them in the briefing room, his face lined with fatigue, but his voice steady. "You bought us time," he said, his eyes sweeping over the pilots. "The city's defenses held because of you." He didn't elaborate. No numbers, no grand claims, just the quiet truth of their impact. Oleksiy nodded, his thoughts elsewhere. The mission had succeeded, but at a cost. Vita was grounded, possibly beyond repair. The squadron was intact, but their jets were battered, their fuel and munitions critically low. The war was only beginning, and the sky would call again. The airfield was a microcosm of resilience. Mechanics swarmed the remaining jets, their tools clanging in the cold. Taras was already at work, his wrench flashing under floodlights, determined to salvage what he could. Volunteers from nearby villages arrived with crates of food, bread, potatoes, thermos flasks of tea. a quiet act of defiance against the chaos. Oleksiy watched them, his heart heavy with the knowledge that this was only one day, one fight in a storm that showed no signs of fading. He stepped outside, the cold biting his face, and looked to the sky. The clouds had cleared, revealing a tapestry of stars, their light a faint promise of peace. He pulled Sofia's drawing from his pocket, its colors muted in the dark but vivid in his mind. He thought of her laughter, Anna's steady hand, the sunflower fields of his childhood. The war had changed the world, but not its heart. Kyiv stood, its people endured, and Oleksiy felt the weight of their hope settle on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose. The aftermath was not measured in victories or losses, but in moments. The silence of the field where Vita rested, the glow of the city's lights, the warmth of Taras's relief, the unspoken bond with his squadron. These were the threads that wove the day's story, a tapestry of resilience and sacrifice. Oleksiy knew the whispers were spreading, in shelters, on streets, among soldiers, a name taking shape. The Ghost of Kyiv. He didn't feel like a ghost, nor a legend. He was just a man who had made a choice, one that kept the city's heart beating. As he walked back to the barracks, the snow began to fall, soft flakes dusting his flight suit. Each one felt like a memory, fleeting but eternal, settling into the earth. He paused, looking back at the airfield, its lights a beacon in the dark. The war would continue, the sky would call, but for now, there was this moment. A breath, a drawing, a city that refused to fall. Oleksiy tucked the drawing away, his steps steady, carrying the weight of the day into the night. Reflection. A letter to the sky. The barracks were quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. Oleksiy sat on the edge of a narrow cot, the dim light of a single bulb casting long shadows across the room. His flight suit was unzipped, its fabric stiff with sweat and snow, but he hadn't the energy to change. In his hands, he held Sofia's drawing, its crumpled edges smoothed by his careful touch. The plain over sunflowers seemed alive in the flickering light, a child's dream untouched by the war that had consumed the day. Outside, the snow fell steadily, blanketing the airfield in a hush that felt like the world pausing to breathe. Oleksiy's body ached, his muscles protesting every movement. But his mind was restless. The events of the day replayed in fragments, the roar of Vita's engines, the flash of missiles in the dawn, the moment he chose to stay in the sky while his squadron turned back. The city of Kyiv stood, its lights still burning, its heart still beating. Yet the cost lingered in the silence. Vita grounded, the squadron stretched to its limits, and the war only in its infancy. He closed his eyes, picturing Anna's face, Sofia's laughter, the sunflower fields of his village. They were why he flew, why he'd made the choice to dive into the storm. He reached for a notebook, its pages worn from months of use. It was where he wrote to Sofia, letters he hadn't yet sent, words meant for a future he hoped to see. The pen felt heavy in his hand, but he began to write, the words flowing like a prayer to the sky. Sofia, my heart, today I flew for you, for your mother, for the city that holds us all. The sky was vast and angry, but it carried me home. Your drawing kept me steady, its sunflowers brighter than the clouds. I don't know if I'm brave, but I know I'm yours. One day, we'll walk through those fields again, and I'll tell you why the sky calls me. Until then, know that every flight is for you. He paused, the pen hovering over the page. The words felt small against the weight of the day, but they were honest. He wrote not for glory, but for connection, a tether to the life he fought to protect. The barracks door creaked open, and Irina stepped inside, her face softened by exhaustion. She didn't speak, just sat beside him, her presence a quiet comfort. "You did good, Spectre," she said finally, her voice low. "We all did." Oleksiy nodded, his eyes on the drawing. "It's not about us," he said. "It's about them." He gestured vaguely toward the window, where Kyiv's lights glowed through the snow. Irina followed his gaze, her own thoughts distant. Raven was more than her call sign. It was her spirit, fierce and unyielding. But tonight she was just Irina, a young woman carrying the weight of a nation. "Do you think they'll remember?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Oleksiy thought of the whispers spreading through the city, the Ghost of Kyiv, a name born in the streets, in shelters, among soldiers. He didn't feel like a ghost nor a legend. He was just a man, flawed and tired, driven by love and duty. "They'll remember what matters," he said. "Not the name, but the why." Irina nodded, her eyes bright with unspoken emotion, and they sat in silence, the snow falling outside like a curtain closing on the day. The airfield was a hive of quiet activity. Mechanics worked through the night, their tools clanging softly as they patched what they could. Taras was among them, his young face set with determination, his wrench a steady rhythm against the chaos. Mikola was in the mess hall, his laughter muted, but present, sharing tea with the ground crew. Dmitro stood alone by the runway, staring at the sky, his stoic exterior hiding a heart that carried its own burdens. They were a family, bound by the day's trials, each carrying a piece of the story that would become legend. Oleksiy's thoughts drifted to the broader war, its shadow looming beyond the airfield. The skies would call again, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps in hours. Other pilots, other squadrons were fighting across the country, their stories unwritten but no less vital. He thought of the people in Kyiv, mothers singing to their children in shelters, soldiers standing watch, civilians painting signs of defiance. The war was not just in the sky, it was in every heart that refused to break. He closed the notebook, tucking Sophia's drawing inside. The act felt like a promise, a vow to return to her, to Anna, to the life they'd built. He stood, his legs steadier now, and stepped outside. The snow had thickened, blanketing the airfield in white, softening the scars of the day. The wreckage of Vita was gone, towed away by the ground crew, but its spirit lingered in the air. Oleksiy looked to the sky, the stars hidden now, but their presence felt. The Ghost of Kyiv was not one man, he realized. It was the city itself, its people, its resilience, its refusal to yield. He was just one thread in that tapestry, one voice in a chorus that sang of hope. The war would test them all, but in this moment, under the falling snow, Oleksiy felt the weight of that hope lift him. He was not alone. The squadron, the city, the nation, they were with him, their spirits woven into every flight, every choice. He thought of the viewers who might hear this story, those who would watch from afar, their hearts stirred by the human cost of war. What did courage mean in the face of such chaos? Was it the act of climbing into a battered jet, knowing the odds? Was it the quiet choice to carry on, to protect, to hope? Oleksiy had no answers, only questions, and he hoped those who heard his story would ask them too. What would you do for the ones you love? What would you give to keep a city's heart beating? The barracks light flickered, casting a warm glow across the snow. Oleksiy turned back, his steps light despite the ache in his bones. Tomorrow would bring new skies, new challenges, but for now, there was this night, a moment to write, to remember, to carry forward. He whispered to the stars, though they couldn't hear. For them, Ukraine Frontline War Stories invites you to reflect on this tale, to share your thoughts in the comments below. What does courage mean to you? How do we honor those who stand in the storm? Subscribe to our channel to hear more untold stories of the Ukraine war, where the human spirit shines through the chaos. Join us, and let's keep these stories alive.